Karyn, thank you so much for talking to us. So you're the legal advisor with the US Embassy in Malaysia. If there was one thing you could achieve to help reduce financial crime in the ASEAN, what exactly would you focus on?
I think that it would be not only pertinent to ASEAN, but also just globally, is looking at the anti-corruption and anti-bribery sector. Because in terms of all crimes are usually either crimes of passion or crimes of greed. And one of the areas, at least for ASEAN, is the working on the anti-corruption, working on the anti-bribery. That's something we work on in the United States as well. And I think that beginning at that, laying that kind of formal culture and getting that mindset is then really helps to help the other kind of factors in limiting crime. So I think it would be that. Corruption and anti-bribery, just focusing on that.
We've talked a lot about the role of new technology. How do you see the role of technology, especially in combating financial crime?
I think it's powerful now, and I think it's going to get even more powerful. Because like I like to say that, people cheat, steal, and lie the same all over the world. And data, if it's uncompromised, it doesn't cheat, steal, or lie the way people do. And I think it's a fascinating point that we're on right now, that as the technology is emerging, becoming more sophisticated, it can be applied in ways we haven't even thought about yet. And obviously, it's the private sector first, the entrepreneurship, but all of those advances, I should say, then come down to the government sector, and we can use it as a crime-fighting tool, I should say. So I think it's just wonderful things ahead.
It's interesting you talk about human behavior. We've had this discussion, transparency versus confidentiality. I would like to know, how can you strike a balance between these two, especially because different cultures have a completely different approach towards achieving a balance between these two?
It's a delicate balance, yeah? And I don't think we'll ever achieve the absolute balance, because I don't think that just exists. And it needs to be something where it is the transparency, I think, is ever important, because sunshine is an excellent disinfectant. Yeah, so to have that transparency, to have that openness is something we strive for. But then again, as our entire world is changing in terms of what we consider to be private, what I consider to be private is much different from what my 16-year-old niece would consider to be private. And so it's not only generational, it's also cultural, it's geographical. And I think that, obviously also the impact with the EU and their data privacy laws, and how those laws can be used for good and sometimes not so good in terms of hiding accounts or other issues, other identities, kind of drilling down to the KYC. So I think it's just a balance that we're continuously working on.
Interesting. Well, that's why collaboration, I suppose, is very important. But talking about collaboration with the private sector especially, we all agree that collaboration is important. But what exactly can be done?
I think that, we are, when I say we, I think of myself in terms of the public sector, the government, and the private sector. The private sector is very innovative, and it's something that is constantly moving forward. And sometimes the government sector, in any place in the world, is not as, it's more insular in many ways, as can the private sector be. Sometimes the relationship between the public and the private is something that we all know we should do, but sometimes we're not too sure how we can do it. And I think that almost like today, the events today, where a public sector person can get up and say, hey, this is my world and this is how I'd like to invite you in. I think that dialogue and that relationship is something with communication. And it's as simple as that. Beginning that communication, seeing the value added from both sides. There are many wonderful things the government sector or public sector can bring to private, and vice versa. And it's just getting us at the same table. And the more times we can do that, the better for us.
Excellent. Thank you very much for your
Thank you. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.